The city has chosen a new Poet Laureate. She's a Jamaica Plain resident who's familiar with developing her voice and skill at venues such as Haley House Bakery Cafe in Dudley Square. And as she puts it on Twitter, she's also a hip-hop feminist and educator. We'd like to welcome Porsha Olayiwola. How you got this position? Did you pursue it or someone come and try to recruit you for this?
It's a combination of the two. I definitely first heard of the position on Twitter. So I think the city posted it and somebody shared it and retweeted it at me. And then I applied. So I applied for the position and it was a very detailed application and then a very intimidating interview process. So
I imagine one of the things that you had to put down there is what you want to do as a Poet Laureate that you haven't been able to do already.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we did actually. And I think I put a number of things, right? And I think something that you mentioned is, that I haven't been able to do already. And so part of it was applying for more resources to continue the work. But one of the major projects is Boston Youth Poet Laureate. So I talked a little bit about that, along with some other things.
Well, what about young people? Why is it so important to put them in the spotlight this way?
Yeah, well, I mean, not to be cliche, but young people are the future, hands down, that is an inarguable fact, right? And I find, personally, I started out in youth poetry, though I wish I would have started sooner. And, I'm looking at cities across the country and the way in which they invest in young writers and what that yields, right? So, for example, this year, two of the National Book Award finalists and one of the winners were both youth poets in their respective cities and have grown and, and now are at this place, right? And so I think about what that investment took and what it yielded and how we can do some of the same things here in the city. Take
me back a bit. What was that like when you discovered poetry, or maybe when poetry discovered you?
Yeah, wow, that's great. I like that. Yeah, I was a young person myself. And I told you I'm from Chicago. And so I was doing something called Louder Than a Bomb. It's the largest youth poetry slam festival in the world, actually. And one of my teachers said, hey, you should check this out. I went. I sat, I listened, and, again, here I am with cliche statements, but it changed my life. And I went home and tried to write, and I remember spending the summer reading and writing and reading and writing and hoping that, I could also do that one day. So.
What did you read?
That's funny. Zora Neale Hurston, actually, I can't remember. It was the summer before my senior year, and I was taking AP classes, and I remember getting in an argument with one of my teachers about Zora Neale Hurston, and like the dialect she uses, but that's also like it's funny because that's also one of my favorite writers, So I remember reading Zora. I always use first names.
Women's dreams and men's dreams.
Well, is that one of?
Just from the beginning, the eyes were watching God.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's what I read. Yeah, so.
Of course, you also did some poetry slam activity here in Boston at the recently closed Haley House Bakery Cafe. What was that like?
I would say it was difficult. I think it was difficult and glorious. And is, rather. And so initially, one of my good friends and I, Janae Johnson, started doing the house slam out of the Haley House Bakery and Cafe due to experiencing a little bit of homophobia and misogyny at some other poetry spaces in Cambridge. And then we also simultaneously realized there hadn't been a nationally certified poetry slam venue in Boston in and of itself, Boston proper. And so we started it, and it was really exciting, and there was a lot of momentum, a lot of energy, and we won, in the first year. And so that created a lot of excitement. And in addition to winning, we also won all 3 crowns in a year, which was like, historical for national or for poetry slam, right? And so it was just really exciting. And we continue to, bring out poets from the city, right? And take them to this national competition where everyone had done well, And so it was a lot of work, a lot of raising funds, a lot of making sure artists and writers' needs are like met, be it food, be it travel costs, be it like writing resources. But also it was so gratifying and so fulfilling to see literally a community, like a house, a home of writers and poets.
And the room in this house, people aren't just sitting there quietly and passively. I mean, at one moment I think somebody said, everybody shows their tattoo. What's going on with that?
That's true. Yeah, that's what I meant. So I told you it was so exciting, but each year what happens is the audience selects 5 new poets to represent the city and go into this competition. And each year we manage to make it into the top 4. And so, we've been in existence for 4 years. That's about 4 times 5, 20 poets, right? And so there are 20 people, give or take, around the city, around the country, who have a little tattoo, a little house, right? So it's like the house slam, So people have theirs in different areas and different spaces, but it's just a reminder, about community, really, community through the arts.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Boston's new Poet Laureate, Porsha Olayiwola. Porsha, one of the poems you wrote is called The Unnamed, and this is about history. Tell us about what you were exploring in that poem.
Sure thing. It's something that's been on my mind a while. My name is Olayiwola. My last name is Porsha Olayiwola, right? And so I'm half Nigerian and half Black Chicagoan. That's how I identify. Often when I first started to do poetry, I would ask people to call me Porsha O because I thought my name was too difficult to pronounce. And then we got to the point where I was like, that is ridiculous, Porsha Olayiwola. You should have people saying your name, I'm blessed enough to know my direct lineage, right? But also as a Black person living in the context of America, oftentimes because of the history and the Great Migration and et cetera, we don't often know exactly where, all of our people come from, and specifically which plantation house, right? And so I decided to spend some time. It had been on my mind for years, right? But I was working on a book, and I spent some time in Mexico just in a room, really. And I just kind of researched. I looked at all the census. They're online if anybody's ever interested in looking up the U.S. Census from 1850. It's all online on Google. And I was just looking for names that match my mother's maiden name from the same area, if that makes sense, to kind of explore, the lineage of Black names and some of the names, which names are the most popular, and does that correlate to the population of slaves on a particular plantation, right? Because a lot of folks took the last name of their slave masters, right? And so that is one of the direct connections between some Black folks, right? Is that we have a similar last name, but we might not be related. But perhaps, right, we can trace that back to, one of the slave plantations.
And maybe we can bring up an excerpt from a performance of that poem.
And people wonder about Black names, why the names aren't shorter, why the runaway syllables aren't easier to catch, why our names chime like music when they traverse between lobes, about why we name our children after cars, after movement, after freedom, about why Black names are always spelled with distinction, while Black names always have a flair. It's because countries who declare independence get to name themselves, because niggas will always know reclamation. And when our names do not have your lineage, when our names are not what you expect, then what did you expect?
Porsha, I listened to this, but I enjoyed here some swift perception of relations, that wonderful term, runaway syllables, but also the progress from bondage to liberation by the end of that poem. Isn't that what poetry is about?
I see. You said that, and I thought. I've been meditating on it since I came here. When you first mentioned
the
that
self-definition
totally. I've never heard it captured in that way, but I think that's exactly what it is about. Or I think about it as being exact as possible, as explaining what's going on in as many details as I possibly can, and perhaps then another person can see me as I've been so to the point, right? They can understand exactly what I mean. And so I think that is freeing, right? Is the freedom to exist as I've named, So yeah, yes, actually.
The other thing I noticed about this, and maybe in the other poem I saw, Ode to My Mouth, is that words and things have their own agendas. I'm saying they split up and go their own ways too.
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
But I should ask you, you've got some events coming up, including one at City Hall pretty soon?
It's true. Tomorrow, actually, I don't know if folks are aware, it's the 50th anniversary of the City Hall, the building, and so we're doing a little bit of celebrating. And I wrote a poem for the building. So
We should mention you've also got a Twitter feed people can keep up with, and so people, if they want to find that, what should they do?
I'm at Porsha Olayiwola. Everywhere on every social media platform.
Thank you very much for being with us. Boston's Poet Laureate, Porsha Olayiwola.